So good morning all. We'll be starting with OPA 90. So OPA 90 is an oil pollution act. After Exxon Valdez spill, there were a lot of damages in Alaskan Sea, and the U.S. authorities passed an act for Anti-Pollution Act. So that was an oil pollution act in 1990, which was after Exxon Valdez spilled 11 million gallons of Alaskan crude in Prince William Sound. Prince William Sound is in Alaska. That time US didn't have a lot of funds there. Federal funds are the funds of the country, and they did not know how to respond to such scale of spill, and how the damages could be compensated in the law, that was also not clear. So there was a lot of environmental damage because of Exxon Valdez. A lot of cleanup was required, and that's why the US government passed this Oil Pollution Act in 1990 so that they could be prepared for this kind of contingency. Now, this act addressed to the various problems which were associated with preventing and responding to paying the compensation for this incident in all your navigable waters in USA. So this was only for USA, no other country was involved for this act. So with this act, they could prevent, respond, put liability on which vessel is polluting, and then demand compensation for whatever oil pollution was there in the US navigable waters. So with this act, the US Coast Guard could check on the pollution, they could check on the maritime oil transportation, and they could set, the US federal government could set new requirements for ships construction, for manning, for licensing, and prepare a contingency planning, which is in form of a vessel response plan. So a vessel response plan is required even if you have SOPEP. That is not applicable in US waters. They have a different form of contingency plan which is known as vessel response plan, and that has to be submitted to the US Coast Guard prior to sailing for US waters. If they don't approve it, you can't sail to US waters. The next advantage was federal response capability was improved. Your enforcement authority on that was the US Coast Guard had got more powers now for enforcement. Penalties were increased, and that money was also put in for new research and development to improve mitigation activities for controlling your pollution, and liabilities could be fixed, plus financial responsibilities could also be fixed. Now, what is this act? So this act was putting restrictions on companies that were shipping oil to USA. So a responsible party under Oil Pollution Act is a vessel or a facility that is responsible for discharging oil or which can create a significant threat of oil discharge in US waters. So this ship or a facility should provide documentary evidence that how do they plan to prevent a oil spill. That means they are supposed to have a vessel response plan or an emergency response plan of how are they going to plan to control the pollution if it occurs in US waters. So that plan will also give a detail how your cleanup of spill will be done, who will be responsible for that cleanup, and what activities you will be doing for that cleanup. And this vessel response plan has to be approved by US Coast Guard before your ship is going to that US waters for the first time. Suppose you're sailing from India to US, last port of call may be in Mumbai. So before you leave Mumbai, you have to send your vessel response plan for approval along with the other documentation to the US Coast Guard. They will approve it. Once they approve it, only then you can sail for US waters. So that is the requirement for, as per OPA 90. So OPA 90 also mandated a double hull requirement for US operating tank barges and newly built tankers. So they had, before we started double hull, they had banned single hull vessels under certain size before IMO could adopt this procedure for as per your MARPOL and X1. So the act created a phase out schedule for existing tankers. Single hull carriers or tankers began phasing out from 1995 onwards. Now, one more point which OPA 90 established was giving responsibility and enforcement powers to US Coast Guard. So they were the authority to enforce that. You don't have a port state control there in US. US Coast Guard is doing all that functions. Enforcing, checking, everything is done by US Coast Guard. Not like our Indian Coast Guard. Indian Coast Guard is basically for patrolling Indian waters and checking for any guys, any vessels entering territorial waters without informing people who are anchoring there, or maybe the fishing boats which enter territorial water, they are caught, or any other attempts are thwarted. So that is done by Indian Coast Guard, but they don't check all pollution activities, who's doing what. If there is a pollution, yes, they attend to it, but they have not got that enforcement power. But US Coast Guard has got all the enforcement power. So US Coast Guard is consistently enforcing law and encourage related businesses and communities to comply with OPA. And they help in the enforcement of OPA and always train the persons so that proper checking can be done of all your equipment. So now suppose you enter US waters for the first time, the US Coast Guard will come on board. If you're a tanker, they'll check your PV valve setting, everything they're going to check in detail. Your pumps, everything. Unless they clear, you can't start discharging. So they check all this spill plan also, your enforcement plan, your preparedness for mitigating your spills. That also is checked by US Coast Guard. So the fourth point for OPA 90 was that they had created a oil spill liability trust fund. तो एक इन्होंने oil spill liability trust fund create किया. This was authorized under OPA 90. पहले ये establish हुआ था 1986 में, but जब OPA 90 हुआ उसमें इन्होंने इसको डाल दिया. What is the use of this oil spill liability trust? It is financed by crude oil tax on barrels, because whatever crude oil is being imported in US is being taxed. Certain taxes for this oil spill
सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही.
सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही.
Okay, there was a call, so I couldn't talk to you. Okay, now this fund, इससे फायदा था जो भी टैक्स होता था, बिकॉज जैसे हम जीएसटी में टैक्स डालते थे फॉर सम अपलिफ्टमेंट, अब कोविड टैक्स डाल रहे हैं, तो उसी तरह यूएस में जो इंपोर्ट होता था उन्होंने एक सेक्शन डाला हुआ था ऑयल स्पिल लायबिलिटी ट्रस्ट, और इसकी टैक्स डालते थे, ऑयल स्पिल लायबिलिटी टैक्स, so that they were putting in this fund. इससे फायदा क्या था कि जो फंड में पैसा आ रहा था उससे वो कंपनसेशन कर सकते थे फॉर ऑयल स्पिल विक्टिम्स, एंड दैट फंड इज बीइंग मैनेज्ड बाय फेडरल गवर्नमेंट. इसमें कोई प्राइवेट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इसको चेक नहीं करता, बट फेडरल गवर्नमेंट का मतलब सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट जो है इनका, दैट इज चेकिंग दैट. जैसे हमारा सेंटर चेक करता है ना, तो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट अलग है, तो फेडरल गवर्नमेंट जो होती है मेन गवर्नमेंट, वो इसको करती है. क्योंकि यूएस में आपको पता है कि कई स्टेट्स हैं, यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ अमेरिका है, हर एक स्टेट के अपने अपने लॉ हैं, तो जो सेंटर वाला है प्रेसिडेंट वाला, वो इसको मैनेज करता है. फेडरल गवर्नमेंट जो है इनके सेंटर पे है, दैट इज मैनेजिंग दिस फंड. So federal, state, tribal, claimant, oil spill removals, damage assessment could qualify for the use of fund. अगर state ने कहा तो उसको भी पैसा दे सकते हैं. And OPA 90 is tied to ISM code, and there is a federal response plan or vessel response plan for vessel trading in US coastal waters. इसमें दोनों टाइप के हैं, tankers, chemical tankers, normal vessels also, because you carrying fuel oil. तो इसलिए नॉर्मल वेसल्स को अपना प्लान बनाना पड़ता है, टैंकर्स के लिए इलैबोरेटेड प्लान है, बिकॉज दे आर कैरिंग कार्गो, दिस ऑयल कार्गो इन बल्क एंड सिमिलरली केमिकल कार्गोज इन बल्क. सो अगर आप ऑयल कैम हैं तो भी ये सारा वेसल रिस्पॉन्स प्लान बना के भेजना पड़ता है. नाउ देयर इज अ लिमिट ऑफ लायबिलिटी फॉर ओपा, क्योंकि जैसे आपका अनलिमिटेड नहीं है कि लायबिलिटी कुछ भी डाल दो, फिल हो गया तो दूसरे बंदे ने कुछ भी क्लेम कर लिया, वैसे नहीं है. They have put a liability clause there. So vessel type, previous limit is, अब अभी का लिमिट बताते हैं, previous limit को छोड़ देते हैं. When it is single hull carriers, जो non tank vessels हैं, की current liability is greater than, अब इसमें SDR में नहीं आएगा because ये सिर्फ US में है, so it will be in US dollars. So greater of 1200 per gross tonnage, or that is greater of $1200 per gross ton, और 7100 लिमिट है. और नॉन टैंक वेसल्स, टैंक वेसल सिंगल हल में ज़्यादा है लायबिलिटी, लेस देन 3000 ग्रॉस टनेज इज ग्रेटर ऑफ 3700 पर ग्रॉस टनेज, और 7-8 में से जो भी ज़्यादा हो उतनी लायबिलिटी है, और लेस देन इक्वल टू 3000 ग्रॉस टनेज. और ग्रेटर देन 3000 ग्रॉस टनेज इज ग्रेटर देन ग्रेटर ऑफ 3007, और डबल हल less than equal to 3000 gross tonnage is greater of 2300, अब इसमें कम हो जाता है डबल एल में, per gross tonnage, और 4985900, and if it is greater than 3000 gross tonnage then greater of 2300 per gross ton, और 19943,400. तो ये इनके लिमिट्स ऑफ लायबिलिटी हैं. अब what are the key provision, कई बार आता है what is OPA 90 और किसके key provisions क्या है, what are the main points here. First is that agency responsibility for coordination of spill cleanup. तो कोस्ट गार्ड जो है वो ऑफ शोर क्लीनअप के लिए यूज होगा, जो ऑन शोर क्लीनअप के लिए EPA और एनवायरमेंटल प्रोटेक्शन एजेंसी होगी. इसका मतलब ऑफ शोर क्लीनअप का मतलब है सी साइड का क्लीनअप जो होगा कोस्ट गार्ड कराएगी, और बीचेस का क्लीनअप कराएगी EPA, ऑन शोर एफर्ट्स. नंबर 2 इसका की प्रोविजंस है OPA 90 का, देयर इज बेटर प्रिपेयर्डनेस फॉर स्पिल प्रिवेंशन एंड कंट्रोल ऑफ बेटर प्लानिंग. Liability, the owner will be liable for all cleanup costs. A third party proved responsible will also be liable for the cost of cleanup. अगर तीसरी पार्टी इन्वॉल्व है, थर्ड पार्टी इन्वॉल्व है, तो they will also be paying for that cleanup cost. Number 4, up to $350 million liability may be charged to responsible party, and this limit can be adjusted by the federal government. Number 5 key provision is prohibition of any vessel that has caused spill of more than 1 million gallons in any marine area. उसको अलास्का के प्रिंस विलियम साउंड में नहीं ऑपरेट करना. 1 million gallons of in marine area from operating in प्रिंस विलियम साउंड. तो उसमें अगर आपने कहीं भी पोल्यूशन किया ऑफ मोर देन 1 million gallons, तो उसको प्रिंस विलियम साउंड मतलब अलास्का में ऑपरेट नहीं कर सकते, क्योंकि अलास्का में एक्सॉन वाल्डिस ने इतना बड़ा स्पिल किया था और उसमें पूरी एरिया उनका इफेक्ट हो गया था. तो उन्होंने कहा कि जो भी कहीं भी 1 million गैलन स्पिल करेगा उसको उस एरिया में नहीं उनको ऑपरेट करने देंगे. ये नहीं कि यूएस एरिया में
जिस वेसल की हिस्ट्री खराब है उसको ऑपरेट ही नहीं करने देंगे.
हाँ नहीं, अगर उसकी हिस्ट्री खराब है और उसने 1 million गैलन को निकाल लो कितने गैलन होता है आपका एक टन. ये 1 million गैलन है, टन्स का अकॉर्डिंगली निकाल लो. कहीं भी उसने स्पिल किया है तो उसको उधर में ऑपरेट नहीं करना है. अलास्का में बाकी जगह ऑपरेट कर सकते हैं बट उधर में ऑपरेट नहीं करना. छठा पॉइंट है बैनिंग ऑफ यूज ऑफ सिंगल हल टैंकर्स मोर देन 5000 मेट्रिक टन. अब वैसे भी हमारा मार्पोल NX1 का भी रूल आ गया है कि 5000 एंड अबव को डबल हल होना चाहिए. तो यहाँ पहले हो गया था, यहाँ भी इन्होंने बैन कर दिया था सिंगल हल कैरियर्स मोर देन 5000 मेट्रिक टन. NX1 में भी हमारा हो गया कि मोर देन 5000 टन आर सपोज टू बी डबल हल. लेस देन 5000 के लिए नहीं है और यहाँ भी लेस देन 5000 के लिए नहीं है, लेकिन पेनल्टीज उसके लिए अकॉर्डिंगली. So are single hull tankers banned as per OPA 90? Single hull tankers below 5000 are not banned. Above 5000 are banned. ये दिखा है ना, more than 5000 का बैनिंग है, बट below 5000 below उसमें बैनिंग नहीं. तो वेसल रिस्पॉन्स प्लान अब आपको दिखाते हैं. व्हाट इज द वेसल रिस्पॉन्स प्लान? क्योंकि कई बार आपका आता है शॉर्ट नोट्स लिखो वेसल रिस्पॉन्स प्लान का, तो जरा दिखाता हूँ आपको. So oil spills are rare, but when they occur, they are devastating. Although those who make livelihood at sea hope to never have experienced oil spill and work to prevent them at all cost, everyone needs to understand their responsibilities should the worst case scenario occur. So one thing you need to ensure that your crew is prepared for any situation. That is comprehensive vessel response plan has to be prepared. अब ये vessel response plan क्या है? So this is a document that outlines that the vessel will do in case of an offshore spill. So the VRP are required by US Coast Guard for maritime operators that are carrying certain quantities of chemicals or refined petroleum products. So the VRP includes information of the vessel like your name, country of registry, call sign and more, contact information for vessel's owner or operator, list of zones that the vessel intends to operate in US, clear identification of incident management team, the people or group who is to be notified in event of spill. That means कहीं spill हुआ तो किसको notify करेंगे, जैसे हमारा SOPEP में है. Identification contact will include identity of who's to be notified, how to be most effectively reaching them, और इसमें बैकअप बंदे का भी नाम होना चाहिए. SOPEP में एक ही बंदे का नाम था, इसमें बैकअप बंदे का भी नाम है. Secondary communication effort instruction that should be chosen if the first contact is unreachable. Plus, vessel response plan should contain information about chosen insurance company. तो vessel की जो insurance company है उसका नाम क्या है? एक मिनट इसमें underline कर दें. और इसको बोल्ड कर दें। तो वेसल की इंश्योरेंस कंपनी है, प्लस इसमें आइडेंटिफिकेशन कॉन्टैक्ट भी देना पड़ेगा, क्लियर आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ मैनेजमेंट टीम, कौन कौन बंदा रिस्पॉन्सिबल है उसका नाम होना चाहिए, प्लस इंश्योरेंस कंपनी क्या है, ये वीआरपी में होना चाहिए। So it is important to understand, although hazardous condition, the engine casualty, grounding, fire or flooding may not directly result in discharge or plan activation. It is required because if left unresolved, it could result in discharge into sea. अब किसको चाहिए ये VRP? Not all vessels required to have VRP, but regardless of requirement, it is useful document to have on board in case of spill occurs. That way your crew will be step-by-step guided at what will happen to them to handle emergency safely and effectively. The contents of VRP will differ depending on what type of vessel you are, size of vessel and how much oil on board. So vessels that need VRP are tank vessels on which they are carrying groups 1 to 4 petroleum oil as primary cargo. Non-tank vessels which are carrying groups 1 to 4 petroleum oil as fuel or cargo. तो अगर आप फ्यूल भी कैरी कर रहे हो तो भी होगा। अब आप एक तो हो गया, दे आर आइडेंटिफाइड एज टैंक वेसल्स जो टैंकर्स हैं, और जो दूसरे वेसल्स को हम नॉन टैंक वेसल्स बोलते हैं। बाकी वेसल्स जो जिनके फ्यूल ऑयल टैंक्स हैं उनको हमने नॉन टैंक वेसल्स बोल दिया। It is noteworthy that VRP for companies operation may not be sufficient. VRPs are contingent on specific location of vessel operating in. These documents are Coast Guard approved, so deviating from salvors are listed is not an option. Even close resources are nearby. If operating in different areas, separate VRPs may be beneficial. अब spill में क्या किया जाए? So in event of spill, the most important thing to remember is so safety is top priority, and once established, everyone on board is safe and accounted for. One of the unknown hot zone to be time to follow up the established vessel response plan. इसमें और क्या क्या वो देखते हैं। So the refer to your vessel response to find out who's to be notified, किसको inform करना है, कौन clean up करेगा, उसको information देनी पड़ेगी। Now how will your insurance help out? Choosing an experienced insurance company, your trust is paramount in event of oil spill. So when you look for insurance company, you need to look out for a partner, not just a business, top-notch company. अच्छा इसमें आगे देखते हैं। Your best interest to create and maintain one insurance. So in complying with your vessel response, turn to insurance company that will support you throughout the process. इसमें क्या क्या होगा? नेशनल ऑयल हजार्डस सब्सटेंस पोल्यूशन कंटीजेंसी प्लान है, नेशनल रिस्पांस प्लान है, ये सब वो यूएस वाटर्स के प्लान्स हैं। इंटरनेशनल जॉइंट प्लान्स हैं, रीजनल प्लान्स हैं, एरिया प्लान्स हैं, फेडरल प्लान्स हैं, और इसके साथ जुड़ा हुआ है वेसल रिस्पांस। ये इनके शोर के प्लान्स हैं, और आपका प्लान इसमें जोड़ के टोटल पोल्यूशन का प्लान वो बनाते हैं। तो वेसल रिस्पांस प्लान एरिया कंटीजेंसी प्लान के साथ इवॉल्व होके फिर पूरा बनता है प्लान। दैट इज योर वेसल रिस्पांस प्लान। ठीक है, तो अब तो सेव कर लें। और कुछ पढ़ना है कि वीडियो दिखाएं अब इसका?
सर वीडियो दिखा दीजिए इसका,
ताकि समझ आ जाए पूरी तरह, है ना।